But on the other hand, the consumption of Chinese liquor is declining. The consumption of fruit wines is increasing. And I thought this is an important area we need to pay attention, given that we have much good wine in Australia. In terms of fruit consumption, again, we see the huge difference. And in urban areas, the urban rich consumes far more than the urban poor. And in terms of rural areas, and overall, it's far behind urban areas. So rural food consumption is about 30 years behind urban, and there are large gaps in consumption between the rich and poor people. Per capita consumption of several foods of higher value by top-income rural residents is below or even significantly below that by bottom-income urban residents. For example, beef, mutton, poultry, eggs, dairy products, and fruits. So this would suggest the huge potential for China's food consumption to increase if rural income increases and if poor people's income increases. And because of this huge potential, a lot of people have shown great interest in projecting China's future demand, particularly the net import gaps. And people are interested in this projection probably at least for three important reasons. First, from China's side, and the government would be naturally interested in knowing whether China can support the increasing demand and to what extent China can support. From those food surplus countries, they are interested because they would like to tap into the potentially huge market. And also for the international community, people are also worried about that if China couldn't supply enough to its domestic consumers, and if China imports in a large quantity, what would be the impact on global food supply and also the prices of global food markets? So people have done various projections. And also those projections differ. And here we listed three projections from USDA agricultural baseline projections and FAPRI's International Agricultural Outlook, and also by Professor Chen from China Agricultural University. You can see that there is a huge difference between their projections for the likely production, consumption, and net imports of soybean for year 2020. So it's interesting that to see these differences, and then we need to decide which one to believe. Anyway, what we have done is that we examined various sources of projections, and we also carried out some projections ourselves using some simpler methods to compare with others' results. And then we tried to form our own judgments about China's likely net imports in 2020 for a number of commodities. Here we share those results with you. So in terms of wheat, we thought that by 2020, it's likely that China may be in a position to net import 2 million tons. And for all other three major projections, they believe that China may be in a sort of a status of being surplus, but we thought maybe not the case. In terms of rice, China will be basically self-sufficient. Just look at the last column. I don't have a pointer here, so can't see. For maize, it's a very uncertain item to project because China's pork consumption is on the increase, and pork is the major meat item in China. If China needs to consume more pork, then whether China is going to produce pork domestically, import pork, or import live pigs, it's not sure. But nonetheless, if we assume that things will move steadily as at the moment, probably China will need to import 5 million tons of maize in 2020. In terms of barley, will be around 2 million tons, and there will be no significant increase. But on the other hand, China will continuously import barley because China doesn't produce many barley, and also the quality is not good for brewing purposes. For soybeans, and we see some differences earlier, but we thought that probably China would be importing 60 to 70 tons of soybeans in 2020. From now on, the import of soybean will continue to increase, but will increase at a slower pace. Sugar, about 3 million tons. Pork, China may need to import about 1 million tons by 2020. Last year, China imported a fair bit, but that's mainly for dealing with the domestic temporary fluctuations. But in the longer term, it's likely that China will turn into a net importer. Beef, probably around 0.5 million by 2020. For lamb, it will be slightly less, probably 3.3 million tons. For poultry, also China will be largely sort of self-sufficient and may import by about 0.5 million tons. For dairy products, for sure that it's not realistic for China to import a lot of milk, but in terms of sort of milk equivalent dairy products, China's imports will be probably around 2 million tons. And China just doesn't have the capacity at the moment to further increase its output. At the moment, the production has already dropped a little bit, and in the longer term, probably there will be further constraints for milk output expansion. For some other products of interest, in terms of rapeseed, China will continue to net import probably around 2 million tons. And in terms of vegetables, China will be in a strong position to export. And that's where China has a little bit comparative advantage because vegetable production and fruits production are very labor intensive. So fruit will be also in a sort of a net export position. In terms of aquatic products, in terms of volume, China will continue to import and probably at around 2 million tons. And in terms of value term, however, China has been in trade surplus because China exports higher value aquatic products, import low value fish powder for feed purposes. And here again, the import of aquatic products for feed purposes will affect the imports of soybean as well. And in terms of eggs, China will be largely self-sufficient. So in 2020, China's imports of foods are unlikely very large. That's our judgment. And China's 2020 net imports will be critically affected by growing production subsidy. As many of you would have known that in the past few years, China has subsidized agriculture very heavily, which helped the food grain production to steadily increase continuously. In the longer term, China's food import needs can be enormous, but depending on the rates of income growth, urbanization, and agricultural resource depletion, and also the size of grain production subsidy. Just a few points to finish. First, SSB statistics about China's per capita food consumption are underestimates. And because away-from-home consumption is not included. So in the future, if you do use these statistics, it's not very useful to directly make reference or make inference on these statistics. There are huge food consumption growth potential in China, and this will be mainly coming from those low-income people and also from rural residents. And finally, in the near future, China's net imports of foods will be unlikely very large, but in the longer term, it can be pretty large. Thank you.